We've got some breaking news we're going to get to out of New York, where we just learned a moment ago the government is withdrawing subpoenas issued to New York Times reporters. The subpoenas were aimed at unmasking the sources behind a story about President Trump's Qatari-gifted Air Force One. MS Now's senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin was inside that courthouse. Lisa, are you surprised?
I'm not surprised, Fallon, I'm not surprised, Katie, that it ended up here. I'm sorry, Fallon Gallagher is here with me and to my left. I'm not surprised with how it ended up, but I am surprised that it took the government as long as it did to make this decision, because from the very beginning of this proceeding, Judge Arun Subramanian telling the parties that essentially the issue he thought was facing the government was, I am either going to quash these subpoenas or you're going to withdraw them. And he had some good reasons for them. First of all, Katie, he told them that there are federal regulations that demand that where the Department of Justice subpoenas either the news media or a third party for information relating to a member of the news media, they have to take all reasonable steps to obtain that information from another source. And he got an admission from Sean Buckley, who until recently was the deputy U.S. attorney here for the Southern District of New York, that they had not done that. He also got an even more damning admission from the Southern District of New York prosecutors that they had gone to another judge and sought what's called a non-disclosure order to prevent phone service providers from even telling the New York Times reporters whose phones were at issue that those subpoenas had been issued. And when they went to that judge, they never told the judge that the subpoenas in question had to do with the news media, much less a dispute about reporting about Air Force One and the like. And so on those bases, Judge Subramanian putting it straight to the deputy U.S. attorney, Sean Buckley, you either withdraw these subpoenas or I will quash them. At that point, Sean Buckley asked for an adjournment of the hearing. One of our interns saw Mr. Buckley in the hallway making a series of phone calls and then ducking into what is usually a room for witnesses to be prepped before a trial or a proceeding. It appeared that he was taking a call or speaking with someone, at least at a higher authority than him, perhaps someone at Main Justice. The other thing that I think is important for our viewers to know is that subpoenas like this, by regulation, have to be authorized by the Attorney General of the United States. And indeed, Judge Subramanian getting an admission from Mr. Buckley that acting Attorney General and nominee Todd Blanche was the one who authorized the issuance of these subpoenas to the 3 New York Times reporters as well as the phone service providers. That was a stunning admission given the ongoing debate about whether Todd Blanche is going to get confirmed. And as you and I have discussed on air, there are still 2 votes very much hanging in the balance with respect to Mr. Blanche's nomination. Katie?
Can you say whether Todd Blanche knew about the manner in which these subpoenas were sought by those underneath him?
Well, I think it's very clear that Todd Blanche had authorized at least the first subpoenas that went out 2 days after the first report. So the New York Times articles that are at issue here were printed on July 8th and July 9th. They were served to reporters at their home on July 10th. That is the thing that Sean Buckley admitted in court that Todd Blanche authorized, and it appears that he was well aware that they were going to subpoena those reporters directly. Now, whether or not he knew about the non-disclosure order application remains to be seen, because at that point, Sean Buckley told the judge he was not prepared to discuss it. That is in part because the regulation requires that before you seek a non-disclosure order, the Attorney General has to make a determination that the disclosure would pose a grave national security risk or someone would be at risk of imminent death. That wasn't something Mr. Buckley said he was prepared to discuss because it would implicate, in his view, national defense information. He seemed to suggest to the judge, we could go off in another room and discuss this without the press being present, without the New York Times being present. That wasn't something the judge was inclined to do. He was very much stuck on what he viewed as a fundamental misrepresentation to the judge who authorized the non-disclosure order. You never told this person what it was even about in the first place. And by that point, the investigation was already public. The New York Times itself reported on the subpoenas to the reporters on July 11th. Why was it that the reporters themselves couldn't have been informed of the fact that you went to their phone service providers to seek information about who they were calling, when, and how?
It does feel like another example of the Justice Department mishandling what would normally be pretty straightforward cases. Does this come back in any form, Lisa?
Well, if it does come back, Sean Buckley vowed to the judge that he will come to the court first before issuing any other subpoenas to these reporters or with respect to this reporting. Judge Subramanian also, Katie, retained jurisdiction, which means if there are going to be other subpoenas about these reporters about that July 9th and July 8th reporting, it has to go back to the same judge. And I have to tell you, this is what we ex-lawyers call a hot bench. He literally sprinted from the door to his chair at the top of the rostrum to oversee this proceeding. And he had one rapid fire question after another. It was like a fusillade of cross-examination directly from the bench to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Not a good day for the Department of Justice, as you've just noticed.
It's not just a daytime drama. There are hot benches, real hot benches. All right, let's bring in former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, Mark McKinnon. This is another loss for the administration.
Well, you put your finger on it, Katie. I mean, I'd love to see, stacked up the number of cases now over, since Trump became president, where we've seen this kind of, just totally unprepared or over-prosecuted presentations that get thrown out of court. And I think this is a reflection not only of the prosecutors themselves feeling pressured by the president to prosecute cases that shouldn't be prosecuted. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. First of all, the prosecuting cases that shouldn't be prosecuted. Then when they prosecute them, they don't prosecute them well or right. And that's just the fundamental problem. And it's so striking, particularly from somebody who campaigned on the notion that Democrats have been anti-free speech. And Trump has done everything that he can to quash free speech and to quash a free and fair press. So this is just another in a long line. It's got to be pretty embarrassing. And by the way, one other point I'll make is I think it's also a reflection of just how many professionals have left the Department of Justice, which is a staggering number. And it's certainly, when you see this kind of conduct today, it's no wonder why they left, and it's also no wonder why it's happening.
Either they know better and something has happened and they're being pushed to do things they wouldn't normally be pushed to do, or they don't know better. And that's that lack of experience that you're talking about, given the number of resignations and firings that we've seen at Justice. And they basically have a help wanted sign above the DOJ. Let's remind ourselves what exactly the administration was upset about. And that was reporting about the Qatari gifted jet, which, by the way, I just learned Donald Trump is still flying.
Yeah, of course he is. He's going to do whatever he wants until he's forcibly stopped from doing stuff, whether it's a war or flying in a jet. But hooray for the courts. Right? Like, once again, the courts are holding the line for our democracy. And I think that the New York Times is also really key here. I mean, this is the second issue on national security that they've helped uncover, and they're providing tremendous public service to the American people. The other one was on the casualty numbers, right, that they weren't accurately reporting it. So this is about national security. It's the highest stakes possible. And we need the New York Times on this because the Pentagon's not becoming transparent at all. And we need the courts to guard that, especially around issues of national security.
Amy?
Yeah, and put aside legality for a moment of this particular case and the victory. This is the most anti-free speech presidency in American history. This is a president who has weaponized the FCC and Brandon Carr going after networks. This is a president who has tried to extract money from networks about their coverage of Donald Trump and his presidency. What he does not like is he does not like to be shamed and have reporters report things that he is doing that either are not in accordance with the law or, more importantly, make him look bad. That's what the core of the reporting was. At the end of the day, forget the grift for a second. At the end of the day, that plane was not ready to be flown. Donald Trump flew it. And when he was flying back from NATO amidst potentially going to war with Iran, it wasn't equipped to be secure for communication.
And somebody had to convince him to use the other plane, which is convincing him that he was wrong to fly it in the first place. And if there's anything I've learned about Donald Trump, he hates looking like he is weak.
Right.
And that is an admission of his plane, his brand new plane, being weaker than the old plane that he wanted to get rid of. In terms of free speech, they've also scrubbed so many government documents and websites of all DEI references, words like diversity, gone. Some cases, words like women, gone.
Celebration.
Climate change
prominent
gone.
Black figures in this country in the military also gone. There's no doubt that this administration is trying to rewrite a narrative about what this country is and what this administration is about. And if reporters try to expose that, and if reporters try to undermine that narrative, they get in the crosshairs. You have a Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who's boasting about the fact that he wants CNN to be taken over by somebody who is favorable for CNN, favorable for this administration and its coverage at CNN. When you have that kind of rhetoric coming out of the Pentagon, when you have the Pentagon making reporters sign a pledge or sign some agreement that they're not going to report certain things without the approval of the Pentagon, we have entered very dark territory in this country, and it is an assault on free speech. So today's victory is important, but by no means is it going to stop this administration from its assault on the media and the press.
You have the administration also demanding individuals be fired from their jobs for not saying things, for saying things that they don't like. I'm thinking of Jimmy Fallon. All right, Eamon. Paul, thank you so much. Mark, you're not going anywhere. I appreciate it. I appreciate the pivot as well.